Thank you, Michael. And thank you, everybody, for coming. It's a very chilly morning, so you have made a great effort to come and listen to this talk. Now, I first just want us to settle a moment in where we're sitting and just taking in the perceptions that surround us, in the perception of sound, the perception of light, color, shape and form, just observing where we are for the moment. Breathing into that. And also allowing that which doesn't have a direct meaning for us. Many perceptions arise and pass away, and we don't grasp them. We breathe them in and we let them go. Just we open our eyes and allow ourselves to be present. I have an issue. I don't know if anyone can help me with it at the moment, but as I talk, it's typing on my screen. If we can, I don't have the dictate on, but it's still, do you have an idea how to stop that? I may not need the notes, but there are a few in there that I would like to share with you. I want to talk today and bring in a couple of koans to today's story, as I often do, about thank you. I think we may have solved the problem. Mind you, I have a lot of other extra notes here, which what to do. So, with these koans and a koan practice in general, which I'm sure most of you are not so familiar with, however, in a way, we are always dealing with inquiry and the mysteries of life, mysteries of everyday ordinary life that arise for us in ways we do not really comprehend. I pointed out just now how in meditation, much of what we perceive in meditation, we have some acknowledgement, some recognition, some answers, some ideas about it, some memories. But there is far more that we do not understand, that goes beyond the perception, the labeling, the knowing. And this is where a practice like a koan or an inquiry can take us deeply into that place of not knowing, to where we touch it on another level. When we go deeply into meditation, you know what I'm talking about, because at some point, as we distill the mind and we enter into the concentrated focus of attention, we go beyond the periphery of thoughts and ideas. They fall away in the process. And the mind expands. It does two things. It expands, opens. And the other is it pays attention to something. It focuses on something. In a koan, or in an inquiry, but I'll touch on two of them here, often what we get caught up in early on in our practice is the ideas of what it's about. What is being said? What is the teacher telling us? But I've started to talk today about perception, where we open that perception, that our ideas either coagulate into one thought, or they just become very spacious and allow whatever rises to enter quite freely. We don't have to do anything. Meditation is about that. If there is a person trying to do something, trying to gain something, trying to benefit from the practice, then we fall short of what it really can offer us. So the point of sharing these koans is to take us into that place where, in an effortless way, we start to connect with all that is both present in our conscious mind and what we have discovered within ourselves throughout a lifetime. We don't have to have all the memory of it, all the stories of it, but here, okay, now we've got it where we want it. But here it is always present within this frame of from birth to when we die. And these koans are actually about a death, both incremental moments of dying and then the great letting go. This first koan, which we'll come back to later, is by a Chinese master, Zhuangyang Zenan. He's often known from his Japanese name, which is Kogun, and it's called A Man Hanging by a Branch in a Tree by His Teeth. I mean, often these stories are they're so unfathomable. Can you imagine someone hanging by? Have we got a picture? I think I had two pictures. Now, the one of the man hanging, the first one, that's it. So just to get you an image, give you an image of the extraordinary story behind this. Can you imagine falling from a cliff? I've given another koan about falling from a cliff and hanging on to a vine. But here he is hanging on to a branch by his teeth. Just the image can express a lot. Say an image can express 1,000 words in that moment you see it. So I'll use the Japanese name. The other one's a little bit of a mouthful. But Kogen is talking about something that is ungraspable, but we must hang on to it. The opposite of that, of course, is we're going to have an untimely death. But either way, something is going to happen here, because while he is hanging in this very unflattering, unpredictable way, somebody comes beneath him. And here you see the little figure below, which is presumably his teacher, says, what is the meaning of Bodhidharma coming from the West? There's another whole story there that I won't go into today, but Bodhidharma, the founder of Zen, the first patriarch of Zen, is said to have come from India, which was west of China. But why? What is the meaning? And here, with the teacher asking him this, he has two options. One is he opens his mouth to say something, and in that 2 seconds before he enters his next life, it will be a very, very, if not the most alive 2 seconds of his life. He will experience something so profound that he enters this death experience in that bliss of profundity, in that awakened state. Or he doesn't open his mouth, he stays clinging on to the branch with all his might and sort of, in a way, makes a fool of himself in front of his teacher, because his teacher wants an answer. What does he do? Now we can reflect on this. We can look at what is happening here. The man is falling to his death. Presumably he is saved by this branch. He's not answering, or he is answering. In not answering, he's not fulfilling his teacher's request. Answering is quickly departing this world. In both cases, to resolve this predicament, he must enter into the emptiness, any remaining stains of egoistic view of the situation. So we can look at a precarious position we've been in. One might come to mind, where if you, in a direct way, you deal with that experience, to resolve it, there cannot be any idea of what it's going to become, or the outcome's going to be, or how you're going to resolve it. With any thought of self here, you're lost. You're drowned. You're gone. However, as in this situation, a self cannot resolve it. A me cannot overcome it. However, in the present moment, in this perception that arises out of the present moment, there are clues. There are possibilities. And what do we choose out of that? Perception is such an opening, broad field. In any one moment, well, we say with perception, 17 thought moments that create a perception. There's a lot of activity, mental activity going on here. And when you're in danger, even more so. They say when you're about to have a car accident, your whole life can flood before you in a moment, few moments. So a lot is happening in any one moment. However, koans are not about finding an answer. They're not about resolving, getting something. And yet, that is what the teacher wants. When you go to a meeting with the master, he wants you to do something, respond in some way. Of course, responding either way here, he will either have a slower demise or he will have a very quick one. Thich Nhat Hanh says about such predicaments, The attachment to wrong perceptions can cause incorrect thinking and unnecessary suffering. And I would also add to that, attachment to right perceptions can add to thinking. Misjudge the deeper meaning. Even though the perception itself is clear, you can see from the first view that line of plastic there is yellow. I would say, yep, that's right. You probably all agree with me. But then you have to ask, well, what is yellow? And that's where we get stumped. When you inquire a little more deeply into a situation, what is doesn't have an answer in the same way as our learned view, our cognized view, our ideas about something do. So the attachments to suffering, one way or the other, are always going to arise if we cling to that situation. I was listening to a talk about a Zen monk in my tradition who had an accident. He was coming out of his retreat to go outside. It was rainy season. Got in his little rubber shoes and he slipped off the step and came down with a great thud. He couldn't see. He said he slipped into blackness because there were no lights, no electricity in the little hut he was practicing with a few monks. However, when he hit the ground with such a thud, then the suffering was very real. The pain was very pronounced. And he looked at his shoulder and it was like an umbrella was coming out there. And what he did, he went back into his practice, into his meditation. The monks around him were wondering what to do, how to get him off the mountain, how to get him to hospital. And he realized the only thing he had control of was to focus back into his breath, into that moment, that awareness of the rising and falling of his breathing. It didn't get rid of the pain, but what it did was it expanded the attention beyond just the body and the suffering and the situation. It allowed that to be there, but it opened the mind to much deeper realization of what is going on. I want to talk a little bit about this Master Kogan, or Zhengan. He was a monk who is said to have had 1,000 disciples, and he was a great poet, he was a great thinker. In his earlier days, when he met his teacher gave him a koan, which I've been given this koan myself. The koan goes, "What was your original face before your parents were born? What was your original face? Who are you before your parents are born?" It's a very interesting koan because of you go back and you think about your parents, and there's a very interesting little poem that he wrote much later, and I'll just touch on it quickly here. I'll touch on part of it, which is a pointer here. He talks about the chick within the egg is hitting the shell to come out. And the chook, or the mother, is hitting the shell from the outside to help him. The chicken and the mother have long passed, and yet chickens and their parent still do the same thing. That connection, that seed of the chook's wisdom, you might say, or the bird's knowledge is ingrained in a seed of memory that goes from one to the next, one animal to the next, one plant to the next even. So we have to see what that connection is in our own perceivable situation, our own perceivable mind. In a way, our parent is there, always. In ways, their face is our face is their face. But how do we go beyond? You cannot do it intellectually. It is an experience. So he grapples with this koan, and he can't understand. See, this teacher was a very great scholar. He understood everything from the literary perspective. He had read all the text, he had written commentaries, he was a great academic. And yet when it came to doing this, he could find nothing in the books that would point him in a direction. Nothing in the text, nothing about the great teachers. And life is like that. We may be extremely adept in some field that we have an interest in, that we have studied, we've practiced. But then there's other areas that we have I have no knowledge about what an electrician does. Yesterday, I just came back from Malaysia, so I'm a little groggy and a little slow. Half here, half in Malaysia. I just arrived the afternoon before yesterday. And I thought, too late to cancel this, but I'll do my best. And I got home. My phone, which was still with the Malaysian SIM card, didn't want to work at home. And I didn't know I didn't have the little tool to put in the Australian. And my hot water system had broken. And my split system decided it wasn't going to work either. So I put on the electric blanket in my bed and I went to sleep to just put on the fire in the house and put on electric blanket and went and had a nap for a couple of hours. And then I came and sat. Nothing to do. Actually nothing to do. Sometimes when something is beyond us, we can be present with it, we know the problem. But there are things we can do and things we can't do in that moment. After my nap, I went to visit a friend in the village. She comes to feed the birds when I'm away or has a look at the garden. And it happened, there was an electrician who was working on putting a split system in her house. And so I asked if he would mind when he finishes the job to come down to my property. So when you sometimes just let go, the resolve sorts itself out. We had the split system, we cleaned that out and got the hot water working. But here he goes to his teacher and he said, "Can you help me with this koan? Can you help me understand about my face before my parents? Who was I before my parents were born?" And his teacher said, "Well, my face is useless to you. Very simple. My face isn't going to awaken you. You have to resolve this yourself. And he was shocked by the answer of his teacher. His teacher showed no sympathy, was not going to point him in any direction, and said, this is your mother, this is you. Find it. So he actually went home, took all his books, it's a famous story, went out, took them out to a paddock and burnt them. His books didn't give him his answers. His teacher didn't give him any support. And he went off to where there was a grave site, and there was a very famous master of the past, patriarchal master. And he went sweeping the paths of the grave site. You may have heard this story. I've heard it in various versions. But while he's sweeping, he flicks a tile, a little piece of tile, off the path, and it hits a bamboo. Dop! Just that sound. And that awoken him. And he wrote a verse. Awakenings come in often increments. I recall hearing about a monk, a Canadian monk, I think, who had some experience that brought him great joy, a jhanic experience, meditation experience, brought him great joy. And after a few weeks, the joy started to fade. So he went and he practiced harder because he wanted to have that experience of joy again. And we often do that. We go and we have a little samadhi and it's so peaceful. We want to have more of it. But we still have the attachment of that memory. And then we go and one day something happens and we sit and we go into a deeper state of peace and joy. Well, this happened a few times for him, and the third time he said the joy has never left him. The peace has never left him. But I was hearing this story from a friend, and I said, in the Mahayana, joy is the first bhumi. Once you have an unending joy, you're just on the first bhumi. There's another 10 layers to go. So if you get so attached to that state of joy, there's an issue. You may not purify and awaken other layers of your mind. But here he writes, here's Kegon or Zangyen writes this verse, one strike and all is forgotten, no more the mere pretense of practice. No more the mere pretense of practice. Transformed to uphold the ancient path, not sunk in idle devices. So one strike and all knowledge is forgotten. So one sound, one action, one sound. Sound is a common one for Zen practitioners to have some experience by. It's a little slower than sight. Perception is harder. Sound is a common one. But usually what comes with sound is an action. We forget. Something happens. Far and wide, not a trace is left. The great purpose lies beyond sound and form. In every direction is the realized way. So everything is already fully realized, fully perfect. Beyond all speech is the ultimate principle. It makes you wonder why we don't go there first. Beyond all speech. This is an interesting point. When you study the two forms of koan, one is the story. The other is the essence of a koan, which is what is this, or who am I? The who and the what are what we call a hwadu. And what's behind the who and the what is a lot of energy. It's a lot of power. And that hwadu is what stumps thought, severs thought. When you go into the hwadu, it's like going into the source of where a stream comes from. Stream of consciousness, stream of thought, stream of ideas. But that stream to, I think there's a seat down here. Is there one over there? Okay, you found one. That stream, once you enter and you go back into the source of that stream, all thought is severed. So the hwadu, the point of doing a hwadu, is to take the mind back to where thought comes from. Mostly we're engaging in, as you're engaging at this moment, in what I'm saying, in what it means perhaps, especially what it means to me. We're all here about what it's going to mean to me. What am I going to deliver that's going to change your lives? That's what you're here for. I'm very sorry I can't deliver any of that, but hopefully you will work on some of it. But what it does, and I've seen the severing of a thought. It's not an enlightenment per se, but it's in the direction of a second, third, fourth, fifth conceptual stream being severed. Just for a moment, just that moment is out of time, it's out of space and conscious awareness, perhaps like going down a black hole or entering a moment of emptiness. When you come out of that, your perception is different. Whatever you thought and the way you thought and the way you cognize things, it's different. It allows so much more to enter into your consciousness. So if you try to grapple and take this and reject that, then you're back to square one. And what happens in this story of this Kegon is the word was sent to his teacher. He'd had some great realization along with the poem. However, his teacher, being so wise, he wants to hear a little bit more. So he sends his monk to go and ask a question. He says, I want you to shed a little bit more light on this experience. And Kegon sends another poem. And this sheds an interesting point. In that time he thought, everything's severed. The world is an awakened, an enlightened movement, you might say. Here he says, last year's poverty was not the real poverty. Why use the word poverty? Impoverishment. Last year's poverty was not the real poverty. This year's poverty is finally the genuine poverty. In last year's poverty, there was still the ground where I could plant my hoe. In this year's poverty, not even the hoe remains. So if you don't have a hoe, there's no tool to create a hole for a plant. Means you've got nothing to put a seed in. Something really worth reflecting on. If this is missing, then that is not going to happen. If that is not going to happen, especially something that's going to bring life, in this case he's talking about seeds of life, then what is going to happen? If this thought doesn't arise, something's going to shift. Still, the younger monk thought, yes, he goes back and he reports to the teacher what he said. And he says, but Kegon has certainly, his mind is liberated. However, in regard to the succession of ancestors, so is he still in line with the teaching of the Buddha and all who have followed since? Is there still the Dharma? Still coming from the seed of Dharma? And so he goes again. And Kegon says, I have a function. I have a function. It's seen in the twinkle of an eye. Even though others don't see it, they still can't call me a novice. Something, I noticed in great monks I've met, one of the things you always notice, this tremendous, sharp, penetrating glimmer from their eyes. It's a light, a deep, deep wisdom light that comes through their perception, through their eyes. This is a very sort of humble note here. I have a function. And it's just a glimmer, a twinkle in the eye. But that twinkle is the source of all his wisdom. Even though others don't see it, they can't call me a novice. Means they can't call me someone who's beginning on my own path. And there he was recognized as a great master. But I want to come back to, time's passing on very quickly. I want to come back to this this man hanging in the tree, which is his koan that he passes on to his student. So here's the fellow at the bottom of the tree here. And if we give me the, we've got the other, we'll have flash on the other one quickly before we run away. So there is Kegon sweeping the tile. They're lovely, these beautiful old Chinese pictures. You can look at it. So we have the elements. We have a tree that has a limb. We have a predicament, a life and death, a clinging, excessive, very controlled hanging on. We have an inquiry or a question. What is the meaning of Bodhidharma coming from the West? It's a classical inquiry. It's used quite a lot for various points, but it's a very distracting factor for the man who's trying to save his life. We have a dilemma. The man cannot answer. If he answers, opens his mouth, he falls. However, there was a glimmer in that point too. I hope at my last moment of dying, I have that 2 seconds that will illuminate the great meaning of this life, deeper than any other experience I've had. And the Buddha said, the Buddha pointed out the time you can practice at your greatest in the moments of death. Because the body usually, the sensations of the body goes, but there is still hearing, some perception, capacity of touch in those moments. Sometimes periods of time before everything shuts down. So you have time. I always say to people who are dying, you have time. I was with a lady, doing prayers for a lady who was dying in Malaysia. She'd been on dialysis 7 years. And finally, something happened and they couldn't use the dialysis. She'd wanted to actually come off it 3 years earlier, but her doctor wouldn't let her. It's different from here. We can have that choice. And this day that I was there, and you don't want to really be dying in a communal ward in Malaysia. Your space is very tiny. The curtains, there's very little space between you and the next bed, and everyone in that ward is dying. So it was quite an experience just to open up and be present. I'm not just talking to her. I'm sharing Dharma with everybody in this room and sharing something. So I first tell her what I'm going to do with the prayers, and we're going to go into, these prayers in a way that is not just about you knowing what I'm chanting. It's a way that you can open your heart to the sound, the vibration, and the wisdom that has been passed on through these chants. And so I did, and she was very happy. She seemed to be very peaceful. I asked if she's in peace. Yes. I said, do you have a practice? Yes, she had been practicing Om Mani Padme Hum as a chant. So I said, let's chant together. And this is someone who hadn't been talking for some days, hadn't communicated. And suddenly she smiled, we chanted together, and she became very chatty, very communicative. And we talked about various things, about, what happens as we come to death. And I asked, do you have any pain? No, she had no pain. So she was able to focus now on her practice, on what was most important for her. And she had a few tips on how to do that and what will happen as she goes through the dying stage and she finds herself in a new realm, in part in a new realm. Usually the senses are still quite here. But as she did this, she became more and more and more at peace. She asked to go home the next day. She went home. She talked with the whole family. All her family members came for one day. She was very chatty, very happy, and passed away at 3 o'clock in the morning. So my experience is that there is time, and to use it very well, and to share that with others. People think, pain's there to the very end. Not necessarily. So with this dilemma, Moomin, the famous Moomin who wrote The Gateless Gate, put all the koans in this book, he said, even the most eloquent speech or profound understanding of the Buddhist teachings is useless in a situation like this. We can see why. He suggested that the solution lies in finding a way to give life to the way or the path of practice, to give life in this moment, to give everything you have in this moment, in this dilemma, to the way, the life energy of practice, the subtle awakening of practice. In a way, it is, this situation is, death is the resolve, actually, or it's disengaging until the moment of letting go. But we have to see that as the practice. So if we take this in an everyday context, then how do we let go? We always have our teeth clenched on something. You know, how often do we grit our teeth, our mouth? We're always hanging on to something. And then what is it that is so important? How can we let go? How can we be present in that resolve? Present enough in the resolve that this isn't all it is. This isn't all we know. It isn't all we have. And if we let go, that's okay. There is so much more. The solution here is no single one. The correct answer to the koan only comes from the depth of experience as one enters into the state of non-separation, into the non-dual of the situation. The limb is connected to a tree. The man is connected through all his senses to everything that is surrounding him. The tree is connected to the earth. There is a sound, an inquiry which asks him to reflect or say something about why Bodhidharma came from the West. There's a lot, both visually, auditory, perceptively, happening in this story. How do we sit with that? So when there's a lot going on, if we're gripping something so much so that it's with our teeth, there's a lot going on in the background of that. So how do we embrace it? How do we become the non-dual in this situation, the non-separate in this situation? So a koan it just provokes a state of what we call no mind, really, of Song Sunim's famous saying that I often repeat, only don't know. It creates an unknowing. But in that unknowing, it's very alive. It's very active. It's very fulfilling. And how we enter into that is very important. The more we enter into a don't know frame of mind, or only this frame of mind, a suchness frame of mind, or who am I a frame of mind, the who, the this, the don't. These are all hadus, these are all simple words that have a lot of pithy depth to them that we can understand. Everything such as the tree, as life, the world, what we know, what we don't know, these are have quite symbolic meanings. We take everything very literally. You watch a child, it doesn't take anything literally. It picks it up and it turns it around, it looks at it, throws it at the wall. I gave a little 2-year-old a little Buddha, a Bodhisattva actually, and instantly it was chucked on something. I said, oh, the Buddha's got a sore head. So she picked it up and she put it in the tissue box, the soft tissue box paper. So she was very bright, this little kid. But, you can't just expect they're going to understand what a Buddha is. It's a doll. It's something to play with. And part of our mind is like that. We don't really understand a lot of things. So we play with them, we experiment, we look at them. We taste and smell and touch and inquire about them. So as we grapple with a koan or inquiry, for those who do know how to meditate very deeply, it will unpack naturally. It will resolve. Often people who resolve one koan very quickly resolve many others, depending on the depth of meditation. But there are always some things that are stuck, that we hang on to the very end. We don't let go of who did what or who didn't do what. Or we don't let go of a sadness, a sorrow, or an act that we've carried guilt with for our whole of our life. We have to somehow sit deeply, hold it a moment, or recognize what it is in the body and allow it to pass away. We need to give it time. And slowly, as intuition and wisdom grow, we start to uncover tremendous depths of equanimity and acceptance. And this is the point. Not just joy and contentment or bliss or states of stillness, but equanimity. That's where it all comes from. An acceptance, an allowance. And we turn inward into that. We ponder, we reflect. You know, we may be doing our everyday actions, but we never know when that moment arises that, tuck, something changes. Something falls away. I've heard many, many stories of monks and nuns where something profound happens at the most unexpected times. Lay men, lay women are the same. We're not separate in this capacity. Sometimes when I'm traveling, I'm pushed out of my comfort zone. And I have to allow myself to, if I'm in the household, to go along with the people and what they do. And I've learned not to try and control it in any way over many years. And this time, in Malaysia, they tend to go out for all their meals. 3 times a day sometimes. At least I was able to point out that I did enjoy to have a little bit of muesli and yogurt for breakfast. So that was offered a bit more, but it didn't just become muesli and yogurt. Then there had to be some sort of fancy croissant or it had to become, omelette, and the omelette was stuffed full of things. So the more they give, there is a sort of a merit-making, I think, view about the more I give, then the better it is for me. And I just want a little bit of muesli and yogurt. But anyway, I would take it and eat it, and there'd be cups of tea and juice and everything else that go along with it. So I don't know whether going out and having Indian for breakfast was any worse, but I went along with it. So 2.5 weeks, it was a busy time, apart from teaching and all the group gatherings, and it was all around food. The group gatherings and the joy to share time and to eat together, and a different meal. I had, I think, 20 different sorts of food, maybe more. But, every restaurant was summed up at the end of the day, whether it was in the good category or what. And so a lot of conversation, a lot of energy can be seen as going down this road. At home we discipline ourselves with food at this time and doing this at this time. But when you're in a group, in a community, it's not always the way you personally would do it or want to do it. So how do you deal with that? And I found it's easier to go along. When I'm asked a question, I deliver to that audience. May say something very different to the other group or another individual, but I talk about what they're inquiring about to that level. Sitting in a car, this is the best part. We were coming, I had asked my friend if I could sit in the back seat on longer trips, because her husband, he drives a little fast. Well, I had no idea what a little fast was going to be. I sat in the back seat, Sito, his wife, sitting next to him, and I sat in the back seat just with my eyes looking at the dial. 130, 140, 130, 32, 33. I was so intent. I couldn't say anything. I accepted. I thought, well, if this is the end, we're going out in a very fancy way. I've had a great holiday. But when I came to get out of the car, I put my legs out. I couldn't move. And Sito said, "Are you okay? You look a bit pale." I said, "No, I don't think I'm too okay." I couldn't move. I got out of the car. I stood up. I couldn't move a single limb. I couldn't move a leg. I had been cavolted into the speed. I was going 130, 140 kilometres an hour inside of me, So I was already, who knows where I was. I was on the speed lane. I mentioned it to Michael and he was very apologetic. He said, "Oh, I was just trying to get back before the peak hour traffic." I said, "Okay." I said, "But when you zoom up to the car and they're forced to move over and then there's another bunch of cars up, then you zoom up to those cars, everyone in those cars get a little bit of a shock. I know what that's like when cars zoom up the back of you and you're suddenly, have to get over there or over there." So there's things and how you say it so gently. I had to be very respectful. I didn't want to hurt because his motive was quite an ordinary motive for himself. He thought if we sit for hours in traffic, that wouldn't be so great. Anyway, that's just a little story, but my point is, how do you deal with things that aren't the way you want them to be? So we've come to the end. I was going to share a little bit more of other things, but they can wait for another time. But I did have one reflection at the end, and I will share this because a lot of you do this practice every day, and this is a great way to get into this sort of inquiry. I am of the nature to grow old. I am not exempt from growing old. I am the nature to fall ill. I'm not exempt from illness. I am the nature to die. I'm not exempt from death. All that is mine, clear and delightful, will change and vanish. I am the owner of my deeds and the heir of my deeds, the owner of my karma, the heir of my karma. I shall be the heir of whatever deeds I do, good or bad. Acceptance completely. I shall be the heir of whatever actions I have done, good or bad. This is the 5 reflections. 5 daily recollections. And I think it is quite, for Theravada Buddhists, it is good practice to actually go in and reflect on a lot of what I've shared today. Because we are going to die. Do we have to die screaming, gripping something, holding on? Thich Nhat Hanh wrote that our own lives are the instrument with which we experiment with truth. Our own lives are the instrument with which we experiment with truth. And I like what Joan Roshi Halifax writes. Our practice is about restoring us to our genuineness, to our authenticity, by shattering our sense of being special. Tok, she's referring to this koan, tok. Our original face then turns out to be something very ordinary. Surprise, surprise. Right here and now, though all the time we've imagined it to be something very special. We've wanted it to be something very special. We might feel that some special quality of knowing or insight or spectacular enlightenment experience is going to make us immune from problems, immune from the suffering, once and for all. But even the Buddha, in his final tangle with Mara, as he was dying, knew otherwise. And sometimes the only thing that finally convinces us of our utter futility, of the fantasies and specialness, is the terrible loss, or a serious illness, or some horrible personal failure, or a nervous breakdown. It's often at such times, reality hits home. We're nothing special. So on that I'll finish. I don't know if there's any time for a question, but maybe not. That's okay.
Thank you, Venerable, for the beautiful and insightful teaching.